I'm about to dive head first into jig and fly tying videos on this channel, but there's one thing that I really wanted to have for my videos before I could even get started, and that was a jig and fly testing tank. I want to build one of these things for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because I want to make sure the jigs and the flies that I'm teaching people to tie actually function. I think that's pretty important. And secondly, because the footage is gonna be badass. Now we're gonna get right into it, but before we do, if you guys do enjoy the video today or learn something of value here, I'd appreciate it if you'd like, comment, and subscribe. Now, I consider myself a reasonably handy person, but I am certainly not an engineer, and there was no blueprint or tutorial for me to follow in building this, so this is all gonna be my design, my original build. So as you're watching this process, let me know down in the comments what you would have done differently. And now let's go to the table. Now the first thing we're going to need is a tank, and I picked up this small 5.5 gallon aquarium from Petco, and there will be a link in the description to this and all of the other materials that we're using in the video today. But this size of tank is going to be perfect for the purposes of testing those flies and small jigs, but if you're going to be testing some bigger lures and jigs, you might want to get a bigger tank, like a 10 gallon or even bigger, depending on what you need. Now the first step we're going to take is to set the aesthetic for the testing tank, and what I wanted to do was to add a black background and a black bottom just to help the colors of my lures and jigs stand out a little better. And in the event that we're tying a jig or fly that is black in color or a darker color, I'll get a lighter color sheet of plastic that I can set in the back in those special cases. So for the background, I'm going to be using this permanent self-adhesive vinyl. This is the Smart Vinyl by Cricut, and this stuff is waterproof. It's made for use on water bottles and stuff like that that go through the dishwasher, so I believe it should definitely stick to the glass of the aquarium, and we shouldn't have to worry about it deteriorating over time. And I just picked this up from Michael's craft store, and while I was looking for that matte black roll, I found this one that has this crazy glittery effect and thought, that might look really cool in there, so that's what we're going with. So now I'm just going to measure the inside back panel of glass, and I'm going to cut this to fit it, and then we'll stick it on. And this stuff is permanent, so we've basically got one shot at it, so let's see how it goes. Alright, now our vinyl background is in place. I went ahead and smoothed out some of those air bubbles that formed with my hands, and it's on there pretty tight. So the next thing we're going to do is add our rocks, and I've got this black aquarium gravel. Alright, now our gravel is in place, and to finish up the aesthetic of our build, we are now going to add some lighting. So right here I have a full spectrum aquarium light, and we're just going to pop that on the top here. And I've also got two blacklight bars. That's right, we are going to have blacklight functionality with this tank. So I've got this piece of black rigid plastic here, and what I'm going to do is use double-sided tape to attach my blacklight bars to the bottom side of it, and then I'll be able to just set it on top of my full spectrum aquarium light just like that. It'll be removable whenever we don't want to use it. Alright, so now we have our black light attachment here, and it's important to make sure that your cables are coming off the same side. Later on we're going to do some cable management and just clean it up. Now let's go ahead and test out these lights and just see how they look. Alright guys, we have our lights set up on top of the tank, and obviously these cables are a total cluster right now, but like I said, we're going to do some cable management with those later and make sure that they're well hid in there behind the tank. So now we're just going to dim the lights down quite a bit in here, turn on that tank, and yeah, wow. We absolutely have a ton of light in there, and this is obviously adjustable, so let's see what we can do with this. Alright, so we can dim it down. Looks like about 5 levels of brightness, and then we should have different colors here as well. Oh yeah, oh wow. I don't know how well you guys can see that background. There's a glare because I don't have any water in here, and it's probably a little bit dirty too, but the background is really reflecting those red and blue colors. It actually looks pretty insane. I'm glad I went with this instead of the matte black. It actually looks really, really cool. So we've got 3 color modes here, and with each one, we got 5 levels of brightness. Now let's turn this one off and turn our black lights on. And since we have 2 separate black lights, we actually have 2 available levels of brightness with that as well. So we'll turn off the full spectrum light and we'll turn our black light on. There's the first one. And there is the second one. Now the camera is not going to be nearly as good at picking up this UV light where you guys can see it, but what I can do is bring out this micro dragon tail. It's UV treated, and see how it looks under the blacklight. All right, now you guys can see the crazy effect that we're going to be getting on these UV flies under these blacklights, and that's why I knew my tank had to have those blacklights. That is going to look absolutely insane in that fly tester tank. And another thing we'll be able to do here, guys, is to combine different lighting modes. So right now I've got my white full spectrum light on and my black lights, and then I can change that to this other setting here, and then to the red and blue. That looks pretty cool. We can play with the brightness a little bit and get different effects for different types of UV colors and stuff that we're going to be throwing in here. But so far for the UV stuff, I think I like these straight black lights as my best option here. It really makes that fly stand out. It almost completely removes the background, so when we take these shots, it's going to look like that fly is just swimming around in blackness there. It's going to look so cool. All right, we have now completed the aesthetic part of our build, so now it's time to move along to the hard stuff that actually scares me. Alright guys, I've got all kinds of materials out here on the table, and real quick I just want to go over what we're hoping to achieve and then we'll get to work. What we're building here is our current tunnel apparatus, and basically it's like a wind tunnel but with water. What I've chosen here as my base is a professional grade cutting board. It's an extremely dense and non-buoyant plastic. So essentially we're going to use these two stainless steel standoff mounts here, and we're going to mount our 8-inch acrylic cylinder on top, just like that. We're also going to attach this wire with an open loop at the top to the front of our base here, and we're going to use that to hold our fishing line in place and suspend our fly inside that acrylic cylinder. And in front of the whole apparatus, we'll have this wave maker pump propelling water through that cylinder. So the idea here is that we'll be able to generate artificial current and direct it through this cylinder, suspending our fly in the middle, and by doing this we'll have a great visual aid for demonstrating and testing the underwater action of the flies that we're going to be tying. So straight away we're going to go for the part of the project that scares me the most, and that is drilling holes in our acrylic cylinder. Acrylic is a brittle plastic. It can definitely crack if you're not careful. And even with flat sheets of acrylic, you have to be careful and go slow so you don't create cracks and imperfections. And another dilemma I had was, how am I going to line up the holes perfectly on the cylinder, because you can't really just draw a straight line on a cylinder. But I did come up with a way, and it's not perfect, and the engineers out there are probably going to laugh at me, but this is the only way that my pea-sized brain could come up with. First, I'm going to place a piece of painter's tape as straight as I can along that cylinder. And I had this long piece of wood in my garage, so I've cut it into pieces here, and these two pieces in the middle are exactly 1 inch in width. What I've done here is create two perfectly parallel edges. That was the important part. So now that I have my painter's tape on here, I'm going to set this down where it rests in that gap. And with my cylinder resting in that gap, because these two pieces of wood are perfectly parallel, the edge that is contacting that cylinder is a perfectly straight line. So now all I've got to do is trace along that straight line. So there might have been an easier way out there, but I think we can all agree that is pretty much a perfectly straight line on that cylinder. And now I'm going to mark two places on this line, 1.5 inches from either side, and those are going to be the spots that we're going to drill. And now we are going to very slowly and carefully drill our holes through this acrylic, so please say a prayer for me. Alright guys, that was actually much easier than I anticipated. As long as you go slow, apparently you get a perfect hole. We got no apparent cracks or imperfections, and our M8 size bolt fits right through there. That's perfect. And now we got one more hole to drill. Alright guys, now we have our second perfect hole through the acrylic, and I'm glad that's over with, because that was the part that probably scared me the most, because this custom piece of acrylic was like $20 on Amazon. Now I'm just going to remove my tape and get this all cleaned up. Alright, so next up is our base, and just like before, we need to find that center line and draw a straight line through the middle so we can line up our holes. Alright, I want to have a 1/2 inch clearance on the back, so I'm going to mark my first hole 2 inches from the edge. And now I'm going to take the exact measurement between these two holes so I can mark my second hole. So now I've marked the locations for my standoff mounts, and it's time to go ahead and drill some pilot holes so we can get those in. Alright, well that was surprisingly easy to drill through that plastic with the regular drill bits, but the other ones, the masonry drill bits I had, wouldn't go through the plastic. So if you guys choose to use a cutting board like I did, this really thick plastic, regular drill bits work perfectly fine on it. Now let's just check here to make sure our holes are lined up. And they are lined up perfectly. And now let's see if we can screw in our standoff mounts into these pilot holes. Yep, nice and sturdy there. Alright, both of our standoff mounts are now in place. It's looking real good. And with the standoff mounts, I also got a nylon washer to replace the standard washer that came with it. That's going to go on the inside of the acrylic cylinder, and that'll just conform more to that curved shape and give us a tighter fit. And it looks really clean. I'm very happy with the way that turned out, but we still got to add this wire in the front there, and I'm not entirely sure how we're going to get that in yet. So guys, I've already made one wire here with an open loop, but I'll show you how I did it. So this was just a wire from a punch shot rig that I had laying around. And I took off all the hardware and snipped off the ends, so it's just a metal shaft. And after you've done that, you can use these wire bending pliers. And basically it's got 6 different sizes here that you can use to manipulate the wire. You can twist it into perfect loops. It just makes it a lot easier with this tool here. But basically you just grab the end of it or wherever you want to bend it, and you just wrap it around that size that you're going for all the way around. After a little bit more manipulation, this is what we got. That would work right there, but it doesn't look as good as my other one. So we're going to use the first one I made. Yeah, this one here looks really good. Alright guys, so what I've decided to go with is my Solarez Thick and Hard UV resin. I'm going to fill that hole with the resin. I'm going to hold my wire in there in place and cure it with the UV flashlight, and I believe that should work. Alright guys, I think that looks pretty dang solid. Feels solid. Yeah, that's gonna hold up just fine. I must say, I don't know how this could have gone much better. It actually turned out a lot easier than I thought it was gonna be. And now we just gotta see how it looks in that tank. Alright guys, now the vision is really starting to take shape here. I've got my current tunnel apparatus over here. We got my wave maker pump in place. But we still got a few more things we gotta do. So I got 4 of these adhesive cable wraps. I'm going to put these on the back of the aquarium. We've got 1 for the full spectrum light, 2 for the black lights, and 1 for the pump, and that's just to keep those cables organized, hidden, and out of the way whenever the tank's not in use. And this is what I came up with for holding the fishing line, and I consider this a temporary solution because I just don't like the way it looks, but essentially it's like a mouse cable organizer. I can run my fishing line through there, and I can use this rubber stopper that I made out of heat shrink tubing to kind of peg that line in place. And I'm going to stick this over here on the top edge of the aquarium above the pump so our line can run over and then down through that hook on the front of our current tunnel apparatus. But eventually I'd like to get some kind of rubberized clip mounted up here on the lip that looks a little bit cleaner. And there's another very important component of the fly testing tank that I haven't mentioned yet. And here it is. Super, super important. I picked this little guy up from Petco. So now I'm going to go ahead and install my cable management system and my line stopper and my aquarium decoration, fill this thing up with water, get my lights all set up and plugged in, and then we'll go ahead and give her a test run. Alright guys, we got a little bit of a problem here. Just a little problem. Yeah. Can you guys spot the problem? Our cutting board is buoyant. It's not extremely buoyant, but it's definitely buoyant. I do have a contingency plan though. We are going to attach some sort of metal sheeting to the bottom of this so that it won't float up, and we'll keep it down on the bottom. I'm confident we can make it work. Well, one thing we can do now is go ahead and test our pump to see if that needs to be replaced as well. And one of 3 things is going to happen. Either this thing is going to be too weak and that fly is not going to move, or it's going to be way too strong and it's going to look like it's in a hurricane, or it's going to work just right. And I hope that's the case because this pump was only $20, and if I were to go and replace this with one of the highly adjustable pumps, that one's going to run me about $60. So it's going to be 40 net additional dollars in addition to whatever I have to pay for the steel plate that I have to attach to this stand. So let's just pray that this works out. All right guys, so the pump is close, but it's not quite there. It's not strong enough to keep that fly up while it's in the middle of the cylinder. If I bring in some line, I can make it work a lot better. Like that looks great, but we need that to be happening in the middle of the cylinder. I mean, it's really close though. Look how good that looks. That looks like it's swimming perfectly. But I need this action to be happening in the middle of our cylinder, so I'm gonna have to replace this with an adjustable one. So we'll get this pump replaced, we'll go ahead and get our stand weighted down, and then we'll see how it turns out. All right, so right here It's the solution I came up with to the buoyancy problem. This is a 1/4 inch thick stainless steel plate. I'm currently in the process of drilling through it. As you can see, I have one hole completed, and I'm almost all the way through here on this second hole. And I'll walk you guys through the process of drilling through a stainless steel plate, but frankly, I wouldn't recommend it. If you guys can come up with an alternative, I highly suggest you go a different route because this is extremely difficult. And in hindsight, I definitely would at least go with something that was half as thick because this is overkill. This thing weighs like 2 pounds. It's way more than is needed to keep that thing on the bottom, and it is very difficult to drill through. So maybe 1/8 of an inch, that would probably be sufficient. You could also probably go with a different metal like aluminum. I'm sure that would be easier to drill into and it would serve the same purpose and still be corrosion and rust proof. But let's go to the table and I'll show you how I am managing to drill holes through stainless steel. So for this process, you're gonna need a power drill and a carbide or titanium drill bit. Carbide is probably number 1 for drilling through steel, but they were out of carbide in the size that I needed, so I ended up going with titanium, but I am managing to get through the steel with this one. You're also gonna need some oil, and I'm using real oil, but you just need a general purpose lubricant oil. You'll also need a couple of clamps to help hold your steel plate in place. And of course, safety first. Wear some protective gloves so you don't get those thin, sharp metal shavings stuck in your hand, and some protective eyewear. You definitely don't want to get little shards of steel in your eyes. I'm also keeping some paper towels nearby just to wipe off the metal shavings from the drill bit and also from the steel plate. So to get started, you need to apply a drop of oil right on the spot that you plan to drill. And the purpose of that oil is just to prevent heat from building up so much that it starts to weaken or dull that drill bit. Next, you just want to clamp that plate down to the table so it doesn't move, making sure that this spot that you're drilling into is not on top of the table, so you're not going to drill into your table. After that, you're just going to drill basically until those metal shavings start getting in the way, and then we'll wipe them off. We'll wipe them off of our plate, we'll put it back in place, and we'll just keep repeating that process until we make it all the way through that steel plate. I'm also just going to use this little tool here to just pick out all of the little metal pieces that I can get out of that hole. Then I'll just clamp it in place again. Go ahead and apply a new drop of oil right to that spot. And then we'll just repeat the process again. Got our second hole done. I'll see you guys after I get my third and fourth holes drilled. All right, guys, we have 4 hand-drilled holes through 1/4 inch stainless steel. Again, if you do decide to use a base like I did and weight it down with some metal, maybe go with 1/8 of an inch. That'll be plenty to keep it on the bottom. This thing is definitely overkill, and it was an extremely difficult process drilling through that steel by hand. It took me about 1.5 hours to complete all 4 holes. Somewhere out there's an engineer saying, what the hell is this guy doing? But I did get the holes done, and it's gonna work. Now we're going to take our stainless steel screws and washers and we're going to attach that stainless steel plate to the bottom of our current simulator stand. All right, there we have it. Our stainless steel plate is securely fastened to that stand, and I'm 100% glad I didn't try and glue this to the bottom of the stand. It absolutely wouldn't have worked. And just imagine a scenario where I lift the stand out of the tank and that stainless steel plate detaches and shatters the tank all over my desk. But that's not gonna happen because we did it the right way. Now we can go ahead and reattach our standoff mounts. Now we can go ahead and reattach our acrylic cylinder. All right, we got our current simulator tunnel all reassembled. I'm going to go ahead and wash this up a bit, and then we'll go ahead and place it back in the tank. All right, we are back for round 2 of testing our fly testing tank. As you guys can see, my current simulator stand is no longer buoyant. It is nice and heavy and weighted down on the bottom. And I know I said I was gonna go with an expensive adjustable pump, but I actually found one that was almost the same price as the previous pump, but 3 times stronger. That first pump was 150 gallons per hour. This one is 450 gallons per hour. And based on what I saw from the first pump, I think this pump that is 3 times stronger might be exactly the right strength that we need. But worst case scenario, if this one fails, I will fork over the money for the expensive adjustable one. But I haven't plugged this thing in yet. We're gonna go ahead and test it right now. I'm gonna plug it in and we're gonna find out if this is gonna be way too strong, still too weak, or just right. All right, guys, this is where we are at with our fly testing tank now. You will see that it is definitely better. The current is definitely a lot stronger and that fly is staying up more. You'll also notice that our fly is tilting to the left pretty consistently, and I've tried moving it around and adjusting it so that it would stay upright, but this fly is just tied in such a way that it has that tendency, and that's why a fly testing tank is extremely useful, because now we can find out what the defect is with this fly, which I didn't tie this fly, by the way, but we can find out what the defect is and correct that. You'll also notice that the fly is staying pretty consistently in the bottom half of the cylinder, and I really want it to stay more centralized, but I don't think it's the pump's fault. I think it's actually the line positioner. Watch this. So right now I'm using the little line grabber tool I made to hold that line in a higher position, and as you guys can see, if I hold it right here, that fly stays pretty much in the middle of that cylinder, which is exactly what we want. So what I need to do is take that wire out and make a little bit longer one just to hold that line in a higher position, and we're gonna get this fly to swim a lot better in the middle of that cylinder. And this confirms that our pump is going to be perfectly sufficient for the tank. So now I'll take the stand out, let it dry off, and then I'll fit it with a longer line positioner there so it holds the line in a higher position. But first, let's go ahead and test our black lights and just see how this thing looks with the black lights on. All right, guys, here is what we have currently with just our black lights on, and you'll see that fly looks really cool. It's really being illuminated by those UV lights. But you'll also notice that this water is super cloudy. It is loaded with dust that was on those rocks and in the tank and debris from the fly itself. And as a result, the water is also reacting with the UV and making it super duper cloudy. But I ordered a filter for the tank. It delivers in a couple of days. We'll put that in and clear that right out, and I think that water should look a lot more clear around that fly. And here's what we're looking at with our normal white lights, and as you can see, it is now a lot easier to see a lot of that dust and debris floating around, and that's the reason it was so murky with our black lights on. But once my filter arrives and I've given it a chance to clear up this tank, I'll take some great shots with the black lights and all the different color settings, and we'll go straight to those right now. Alright, I think this tank turned out pretty nifty, if I do say so myself. As a reminder, there will be links in the description to all of the materials used today, and I'd love to hear in the comments what you guys would have done differently in this build. If you haven't already, consider subscribing. I have big things planned for the Vice Principals Jig and Fly Tying playlist in 2024. It's going to be a big year. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.